City of Stevens Point Public Policy and General Government Meeting, recorded September 14, 2020.
Alderperson Jennings, being the chair, you may call the Public Policy and General Government Committee meeting to order and commence your business.
Thank you. I'd like to call the September 14 Public Policy General Government meeting to order. We have Alders Kneebone, Fischler, Leek, Nabel, and Jennings in attendance, so we have a quorum. Our first agenda item is the license list, and we will take A, B, and C together. A is a Class A liquor and Class A beer license for Caravan Wine Shop LLC. Second one is for Star Bangled Spirits LLC, located on Highway 10 East. And the third one is same license for Stanley Shell Inc. 2733 Stanley Street. Chief Zinner, do you have any concerns about any of these applications? And then we'll go to the committee.
No concerns.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, any questions or comments from the public? I see nothing. We'll bring it back to the committee. What are your wishes?
Alder Fischler here. I move to approve the licenses.
All right, we have a motion by Alder Fischler and a second by Alder Nabel. Any other comments? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, unmute and signify by saying nay. Seeing none, the motion carries. Agenda item number 3 is a request.
Chairperson Jennings, please allow me to interrupt. Just to avoid any confusion, because it's happened twice already. Anyone who's wishing to speak, please wait for the chairperson of that committee to call on you rather than just jumping in. It would be a little bit easier. I know if you're not on video, that's probably a little more challenging. But to try and avoid people talking over each other, I think it would be helpful.
Okay, moving on. The next agenda item is a request to hold event and street closings. The first one is, we'll take these separately, as the 45th annual Frostbite Road Race. This is a recurring event. This is a family and friend tradition in central Wisconsin. This road race and family fun walk offers support and promotes physical activity and community wellness. It's a fun event for all ages and supports programming like Life Strong and diabetes management. Any concerns from Chief Zinner?
No concerns.
Any comments, questions from the committee? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Mayor?
So one thing that I noticed here is it says, is there any other special assistance from the city? And one of them is barricades to prevent traffic on closed roads. We do not supply barricades for special events anymore. Have they been made aware of that?
I did not contact them about this. This would have gone through the clerk's office, correct?
Sure. Madam Chairperson, then I would ask this, Chief Zinner's got something to say.
I can check. Normally that's handled with Lieutenant Mueller, but I can double check. They do have auxiliary officers that will be there for traffic control. Normally he reminds them, or Lieutenant Spath did when he was in there. We had a bit of a changeover, so I can confirm on that, but I hate to say I assume so, but I assume that was discussed.
As long as they're made aware of it at some point, I'm good.
All right, could we have a motion with the exception of the barricades being provided by the city? I see Alder Nabel. Do we have a second?
I'm sorry.
Second by Alder Kneebone. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Next is item number B under event street closing, supporting our police department. This is apparently a rally. And I'm wondering if the applicant is present because there's very little information provided in the packet. Jane Blanchard in attendance. This request comes in from Custer. And all the information we have is that it's to support the police and it appears to be a rally. Chief Zenner, do we have any further information or any cause for concern with this?
I do not know of any street closing. They will not have auxiliary or checked off that they need auxiliary. So from my understanding, or what I written on here was that it will be held at the courthouse from noon until 2. But no road closing, so I have no concerns on that.
So your recommendation is to approve?
I don't have any issues with it at the police department.
Okay. Any questions from the committee?
So we don't have a lot of knowledge of what this will look like in practice, just speeches or something and singing songs.
Well, we don't, that's a good question, but we don't know because no information.
Okay.
is
Yeah.
available.
Okay.
And the applicant is not here to answer questions. Alder Nabel?
My District 3, Cindy Nabel, I'm just concerned about, there's not even anything mentioned about numbers or estimated numbers. I guess that would depend on where we're at with COVID. That's for sure. But that would be October 25th, and I would be concerned if there's more than a certain number of people that it would be required that there's masks and distancing.
I'm not sure that we're able to require that, but it's
You can.
the fact that nothing is. Oh, we can? Okay.
I believe you can put stipulations on there if you want the event to be less than 50 people, which is what the current health department guidelines are. I think the state mandate already covers masks. However, that's set to expire on September 28th. We don't know if that's going to be renewed yet. But if there are certain conditions on which you want to approve this permit, and I would defer to the city attorney if I'm wrong.
Hello.
Hello? Yes?
Hello. Hey, we got you guys. This is Jane.
There
Sorry,
we
we've
go.
been trying to, we've been listening to you guys, but we haven't been able to speak. Yeah. Sorry about that.
So Chairperson Jennings, it appears that the applicant is now present.
Yes, could you please, you've obviously heard us talking. Could you please provide a little bit more information before we consider this application?
Sure. We're still in the process of putting it together. We're trying to keep it as safe as possible. We have no idea how many people will attend because it's out for the community to join with. And it's for the police department, the fire department, the servicemen and women. We're looking at possibly like being at the courthouse and then probably on the sidewalks and doing the social distancing and masking as you were speaking.
With the applicant here, does anyone else have questions? Alder Shore?
Thanks. I'm wondering at that location whether it would be helpful. I don't know, how full that the parking lot gets, but I'm wondering whether that would give more room and would help with distancing if there are more people than would fit in that sidewalk by the entrance.
Can we do both? Can we do both? Well, that's what we're kind of looking to do, it both at the courthouse and on the sidewalks, like preferably maybe like on the sidewalks by the police department and like some of the main, you know, streets, and just staying on the sidewalk so people would park throughout the city.
Well, Jane, you can't block streets without approval, and the police department is no longer at City Hall. So.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. I'm talking about being on the sidewalk. Strictly no blocking of any streets, just people parking amongst and throughout Stevens Point and attending that way on the sidewalks.
So my point wasn't about parking, really. It was about the dimensions to maintain distancing. And what I was asking about was, so there's the space by the steps at the entrance, and that's the sidewalk. And what I'm asking about is if there's a problem with how many people relative to the space, I was asking whether, not about parking, but whether the event, if there were more people, could use that municipal parking lot directly across. That was my question.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. I totally understand what the question now. Yes, then we wouldn't do it at the courthouse. Then we would just be on the sidewalks throughout Stevens Point.
Mayor Weezer?
So a couple of things, if I may, Madam Chairman. First of all, Jane, what is the intention of the event?
It's just supporting the police department, supporting the firemen.
By support, what do you mean? What are people going to do at this event?
Mayor, this is the city attorney. I'm going to jump in there. We really ought not be in the business of inquiring about the content of an event, of a political rally.
If you would allow me to continue on, city attorney, because it actually pertains exactly to that, based on what it might be, if it's just people standing on sidewalks showing support, and however they show that is fine. I would submit that they don't need a special event permit. That's like saying, you know, turn your lights on at 6 o'clock. We don't need a special event permit for that. So city attorney, I would defer to you if this is going to be something citywide where they're saying stand outside and show your support for police, fire, and servicemen. Is there really a special event permit that's needed?
I'm actually not sure there is. In fact, looking at the application, I'm seeing a whole bunch of no boxes checked.
And that's what I'm getting at.
Okay. I wanted to jump in there before you.
Right. You have no idea where I was going. I understand.
Before you clouded the record with any lines of inquiry that we didn't want to have. That's all.
So based on what the applicant has told us thus far and the nature of the event, in your opinion, Logan, do we need to consider this as a special event? There's no street closings. They're doing it on the sidewalks and they're just showing support.
No, I'm not hearing anything that would trigger any special events permitting requirements, frankly.
In that case, for the applicant's knowledge, since we don't know what they're going to be doing, if any of those boxes on the application would ever be set to yes, if you need auxiliary police, or if you're serving alcoholic beverages, or you're going to utilize any city facility. By the way, the courthouse parking lot is not a city facility, that's county property. If you needed to check any of those events or any of those boxes during the course of that event, then you would need special event permission. But it's not your intention at this point, based on the application, to use any of those services. Is that correct, Jane?
Yes, it is. I was just told that I did need a permit. That's why I put the permit, was asking for the permit to make sure that I was in compliance with everything.
Sure, and again, barring any input from the city attorney, as long as the event is on the public sidewalks, and it doesn't infringe on private property, or any additional city property or facilities, and you don't do anything that is in violation of the law, i.e. blocking traffic, blocking pedestrians, or any other mode of transportation on those aforementioned sidewalks, and you don't require the use of police department or auxiliary police, it's my belief you don't need a permit at all.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and good luck with your event.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to
I'm sorry.
agenda item number 4. This is a discussion item. Discussion and creation of a panel charged with producing an overnight parking policy. This agenda item was brought forward by Alder Kneebone, who I hope can hear us.
Well, I think she cut off on my phone, so my guess is that she got connected somehow. I've admitted several people, but I didn't recognize any of the phone numbers. I think she's coming in now. If you'll give us just a few seconds for her to connect.
There she is.
Mary, are you with us?
Here you are.
There we go.
Okay, all good.
Okay, so this agenda item was brought forward by Alder Kneebone. I will ask the Alder to explain the what and why of this proposal, and then I will ask Attorney Beverid to address how this might or might not fit within open meetings law, and does this require an ordinance change? And then I will ask staff to comment, since this proposal may or may not bypass already existing procedures for parking, and then the committee and public may follow. So Alder Kneebone, take it away.
Thank you for your indulgence. After 2 different uploads and 2 different cell phones, I've pretty much followed everything. When I was in grad school, I was exposed to Ian McHarg and his concept of design with nature. For those of you old enough to remember the old overheads, he would take an area that was going to be developed and overlay onto that area all the things that you wanted to preserve. And the area left open was where development should happen. I think if we look at the city holistically and overlay areas where parking overnight would be appropriate based on things like street width, emergency routes, neighborhood density, factual things, not necessarily someone's opinion. I think if we trust staff, we get a couple of alder people, a couple of people from the city, from a couple citizens, representatives from police and fire, so we don't infringe on emergency routes. I think if we can get together and work out a compromise, we can find a way to use like a zoning overlay to find areas where parking would be appropriate and where parking would not be appropriate. And then we can also work out some type of fee structure to ensure that we are getting some funding to help preserve the roadways. So that's kind of my thought, that we get some reasonable people together, see what kind of a compromise we can come up with, look at the city as a whole and not just willy-nilly, but use a rational approach. I guess once an urban planner, always an urban planner, and I'm sure I can see Ryan smiling over there or rolling his eyes. So that's kind of what I envision this to be, a group of reasonable people looking for a compromise that will allow citizens and visitors to use our streets more for just driving.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Beveridge, would you address if there's any issues related to open meetings, and would this require a committee, the creation of a committee?
Well, I think the question there is, independent of whether this is quote unquote created or what do you call it, a committee or whatever title you give it, if there is a decision by the city council to task a particular group of people to come up with a policy, then it's likely that that would require it to have a noticed agenda and be open to the public. It would be very akin to the somewhat recent case that came out of, I believe it was Appleton, the school district over there, where they had their curriculum committee. It wasn't made up of elected officials or anything like that, but the courts decided that because it was a delegation of power by the school board, it constituted a body for public meeting purposes. Now, however, I believe in that case, it was that committee actually had authority to make final decisions on things. So here, if it's just a group that will come up with a policy that would then come before this body and then ultimately go to the Common Council, that it might be that then it doesn't have to operate under the normal public meetings rubric. However, that particular detail I'll have to check into prior to next week's council meeting. I think that would really be the wrinkle there that we'd have to think about. So that being said, it's the kind of thing that is pretty customary. So we wouldn't be going out on a limb by any means, no matter how this plays out.
Yeah, if I can just, that would be exactly what I envisioned. The group would get together, come up with a few ideas, then bring that back, hopefully by November, for a public hearing, comments, critiques, all of that kind of stuff. And then we could come back and make it more formal, and then it would come back to through the committees and the council once more, at least into December. So this group wouldn't have authority. It would just be to put something together, basically like the things that staff puts together and then presents to the council. It would be kind of the same thing. And I'll be quiet.
Okay, Chief Zinner and Director Kronowski and Director Badoon, do you have any comments? Because this is basically presenting this idea to the public. Chief Zinner.
I don't have any issues.
So I guess, Alder Kneebone and I kind of concocted this idea together, I guess, as recovering urban planners, if you will. In the year that I've been with the city, we've had this conversation about overnight parking at least 4 times. I know prior to my employment with the city, this has come up a number of other times. It's not going away. I think that's something we need to recognize just collectively. And so the goal of this group, it would be really to be setting up some working sessions where we really dive into what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and only be making policy recommendations likely to the public policy and general government committee as a whole. And I think that's really one of the small steps that we can take to address this, recognizing that there is no blanket policy throughout the city that's going to work. But if we can really hone in and figure out, as Alder Kneebone mentioned earlier, where it makes sense, where it doesn't make sense. I think that was really the idea of this group getting put together.
Thank you. Director Badoon, do you have any comments?
Thank you. I think what we've otherwise seen is, Director Kronowski otherwise had said, is that we have talked about this numerous times, and I would tend to agree. I think there's some large items that I think people tend to disagree in, and I think many of them probably in the smaller realm of things, which I do think need to be investigated further. And I do think such a group could otherwise be tasked with doing that and trying to get into some of what may have been otherwise considered the minutia, which has held us up in the past. So I definitely think that such a group, tasked with that could be beneficial to finally getting some resolution once and for all, albeit it'll probably require some compromise to get there. But if we're willing to accept, the recommendations of such a group, their ideas and thoughts that they put together and weigh that in our decisions, I think that could hopefully only be a positive.
Any comments from the committee or questions? Well, Director Konoski and then Alder Nabel.
Yep, my only request would be is whether or not the committee has an interest in forming this group. If you don't have an interest, we can keep kind of putting it together on at the staff level. But if there is an interest, I think what we can do is Chief Center, Director Badoon, myself, and maybe a few others can start putting together kind of a working group. Bring it back to this committee in October for consideration and formalization, and then hopefully over the next several months work out a plan that's going to work the best for the city going forward. So I think that would be kind of the actionable item I think that staff is seeking from the creation of this out of this discussion.
Cindy Nabel, District 3, I would like to say I'd like to approve this idea. I think it's not going to go away, and there's going to have to be some compromise, and I think it takes people sitting down together and looking at how can it be done. So we know this is going to be a bigger problem as we go on with once we have some of the apartment complexes built. It's not going to go away, and so I do agree that this kind of a committee is important to have, and I'd love to be on it if that's possible, but I do think we need one. So I would like to move that we do approve a committee being set up.
Well, I will second that. Alder Kneebone here.
Alder Fischler, I just think there's been so much discussion surrounding parking and a lot of heated discussion as well. So I think it's really important that we have some people specializing in this area and bringing good ideas forward, just because it's been such an area of contention.
All right, we do have a motion in a second, but I'd like to give the public an opportunity to speak. Is there anyone who would like to speak from the public? Joe and Nancy Roppy, go ahead.
There we go. Hi, Nancy Roppy, 925 Smith Street, and I've timed out these comments. They should be under 3 minutes, and I appreciate it if you'd allow me to finish and not cut me off. Once again, overnight parking changes are up for discussion. This flawed proposal couldn't get through 6 separate attempts, not through Public Works, not through this committee, and not even by calling an audible during the consent agenda at the Common Council meeting. That underhanded, bad faith attempt to sneak it through was a fail only because of a technicality. So don't talk to me about being reasonable. You know darn well it is impossible for the public to react to dirty pool like that when at literally a moment's notice, any item from any committee agenda can be pulled up for discussion and action by any one of 11 alders. That's hardly reasonable representative governing. So now you're creating a so-called blue ribbon panel, another roundabout way to approve this unneeded solution to a non-problem. To say that I'm conflicted about this proposed blue ribbon panel is an understatement. If the intent is to stack the panel with alders who support free on-street overnight parking, we all know what the outcome will be. Or are you punting the issue to a panel so later, when free on-street overnight parking is approved and things go bad, those who voted in favor can claim they were only following the recommendations of the blue ribbon panel? I've heard the plan is to put a landlord on the panel. That represents a huge conflict of interest because anyone with a financial stake should not even be considered for inclusion. When this issue came up months ago, we were originally told it was to help out a lone teenager. Then the reason evolved into a quasi-social justice issue. If that was a real concern, you'd be calling for repeal of daytime parking fees, since they are much more serious a financial burden to a larger contingent of the population, namely college students, who are least able to pay. You're not, which tells me social justice is nothing more than a convenient smokescreen. Now it's morphed into, we need to help out the poor landlords who have over-rented their underparked properties. The serious objections of the street and police departments and multiple failed attempts to get it through 2 different committees and the Common Council should have been enough to leave the overnight on-street parking rule as is. We have an existing rule. If you can afford to own, insure, maintain, and fuel so many vehicles, you have nowhere to park them, you should pay for parking and not expect a subsidy at taxpayer expense.
Okay, thank you for those comments. The motion before us is.
Joe wanted to comment.
Yeah, I got a comment here. May
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
Joe Roppy, 925 Smith Street. At the August 10th meeting, I showed you photographs of the type of behavior, the behavior free or extremely low cost overnight parking enables and why we want to avoid it. On Smith Street alone, there are upwards of 10 rental properties. If you don't count the student rental down the block, that was destroyed in an arson fire earlier this year. Here are pictures of a typical student rental. There are already too many occupants at this property. This is a property that had a 2-car garage, but enclosed one of the stalls to create a bedroom. You can see a car parked in the driveway in front of where a garage stall once existed. If we apply a conservative estimate of 1 or 2 extra vehicles from each of the 10 existing rental properties, that is 10 or 20 cars out in the street each and every night. And that could be, there could be more if landlords take advantage of relaxed parking rules. There could be more if students simply stop their weak attempts at shoveling and instead park in the street. This automatically becomes disruptive to an already struggling neighborhood. A family with a teen driver should first try to satisfy their transportation needs by having the teen borrow mom and dad's car when needed or use public transportation rather than acquire an extra vehicle and expect the city to accommodate their parking needs. Allow free or extremely low cost overnight street parking, and you encourage absentee landlords to add tenants to already over rented properties and countless cars on the streets. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Okay, I just want to be clear that we are not making a decision right now about any parking policy. The motion before us is merely to direct staff to flesh out what this panel would look like, what their responsibilities would be, and who might be on it. That's my understanding of the motion.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Bob Woehr, 7.
May I finish? May I finish my comments, please? So that is the motion, and if anyone wishes to correct me on that, I just wanted to clarify what the motion is. Alder Johnson, or President Johnson, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to speak in support of the creation of this. Again, this has been a volatile, sometimes controversial topic, and I think it has merit in exploring where best it is suited, if it is indeed suited. And the only way we do that is by having the conversation, not at a committee meeting, but where we have stakeholders around the table, having the discussion, looking at the maps, looking at the situations, and then coming with a number of options for council to consider. So thank you, Alder Kneebone, for bringing this forward. I look forward to seeing the results of it. I do not look forward to volunteering for it, so I will not.
Mr. Woehr, do you have comments related to this specific agenda item? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. The agenda item, I don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me. However, my recollection is that it was
Bob?
discussion only. Yes.
Name and address, please.
Bob Woehr, 727 2nd Street. My recollection of the agenda is that it's a discussion only item, not for action, and you have a motion and a second and preparing to move to vote to create this committee. or whatever it's going to be called. And I don't believe that you can take action on it since it's agended as a discussion only item. Thank you.
Yes, and it was Director Konoski that actually asked for it to be an action item. Mayor Wiese, go ahead.
Mr. Woehr, you're incorrect on that. If you look at the top of the agenda, right under the word agenda, it says discussion and possible action on. Any of the items are actionable unless they say discussion only. This one does not say discussion only, so I believe that the motion is in order.
Okay, any other comments from the public? We'll bring it back to the committee and then we will vote. Any other comments from the public? Bringing it back to the committee. Anything further?
I just would like to say one thing. I think every one of us that live and pay taxes in the city of Stevens Point has a financial interest in this. We're not looking at particular groups of people. We're looking at the city as a whole because we all have a stake in what happens. And we may very well come up with a fee structure. So that's all on the table for discussion down the road. Thanks.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Abstentions? Motion carries. Our agenda is exhausted and we adjourn at 6:51 p.m. according to my clock. Thank you, everyone.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.